All right. Hi, everybody. This is our second installment of our CTS podcasts and webinar series. With us today, we got Josh Grabowski from Copeland Technology Solutions, myself, Eric Poza from Copeland Technology Solutions, and we've got Tom May from Global Data Vault. Global Data Vault is a Veeam cloud services provider, and they provide a place for organizations to send copies of their backup data, and they provide consultation services on how to protect your data from loss. So I appreciate you guys being with us today.
Happy to be here.
All right. So. Definitely. Always fun to talk about disasters, right?
Absolutely.
It's always a good thing to talk in preparation for disaster. It's always a positive conversation. It's a conversation you should be having with your teams. So right out of the gates, we want to talk about a very important methodology. If you are in leadership, you're responsible for your organization. It's called the 3-2-1 methodology. And the 3-2-1 methodology means you have 3 copies of your data. You have two copies on different media. So whether it's on backup tape or if it's to the cloud or something like that, you have 2 different types of media. And the last one is that one of those has to be offsite. You have to have a copy of that data offsite to protect yourself from physical location challenges. And also just to add extra layers of protection to your information. So Josh, a lot of organizations look at backup differently. They look at themselves as large organizations or I'm a small business. Why is it important that organizations of any size pay attention to this 3-2-1 methodology?
Sure. I mean, it's about redundancy, and it's the fact that the 3-2-1 method has, been around for a long time. It's tried, it's tested. Obviously, the more backup copies that you have, the less chance, you have to lose all of them at once. So, having a 3-2-1 plan for your backup, states that, you have 3 copies of your data, you have your primary, you have your 2 backups. And then also, what's most important is storing one of those copies offsite. We'll talk a little bit later on in the podcast about disasters, but making sure that you have one of those copies offsite is going to be, extremely important when it comes to recovering from, a disaster should your company experience one. So I would say it's the most important reason we use 3-2-1 is just because it's withstood the test of time. It's, it's a proven way to make sure that your business is in a great spot to, recover your data and get back to working should there ever be any sort of disaster.
Yeah, absolutely. And those extra copies, man, they come in handy. How many times we say, hey, can you get this information back? It was deleted, but you don't get the right information from the user, and you have to go to this set of backups versus that set of backups. So it never goes exactly as planned. So having those extra copies, there's nothing wrong with that. It's nothing but helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah, you never know when you'll need them too. I mean, it seems, every time, you go through it, just like, man, I'm really glad we have those backup copies because I feel like at least once a day, you see something come through for us, in the tickets where it's just like, hey, I can't seem to find this file. I think it might be gone. Can you go get it? And having all those backups helps to make sure that, we can recover that stuff.
Absolutely. So now we've used the term copies. There are actually 2 different types of backups. There's backup copy, which we've kind of mentioned here, and there's what's called replication. It's very important that we understand the difference between the 2 because both are important and both should be in the discussions when you're putting together a strategy. Backup copy being a snapshot in time of how something looked in a file form. So if I take a picture of a server, it is a one-time snapshot in time of how that server looked, and it's a file. It's a copy of that server. Replication means you have a server with resources turned on, ready to go, and a copy of that server is sitting in the secondary location, ready to go. Backup copies, they take a little bit longer. Replication should be a quicker transition in the event of a disaster. So Tom, from Global Data Vault's standpoint and from your background in this topic, why is it important to have a mix of both backup copy and backup replication?
Well, ultimately, the reason is it's protection, right? Um, Coming out of the landscape, replication was really born out of cost savings first. It was IT guys love to save money. I mean, every time we come around the corner, somebody wants to spend money, and you're just like, really? Do you need this? Like, do we need the Lamborghini? And so replication gave us the ability to give us the speed of a Lamborghini, but at a much better cost factor. I mean, it's so much less. So really, it drives it, it keeps things moving quick. It's easy recovery and wonderful. Where it lacks, because it is so live, so fast, it's those malware infections. You can easily infect what's running pretty hot. So what you need to do is kind of put a little bit of gap in there. You guys talked a lot about 3-2-1. We like to say 3-2-1-1. And everybody's like, well, you're just being, a magician. You're putting a -1. What does that mean? Really, what it means is let's give a little bit of gap. So we're going to take those original file structured backups. And what we're going to do is I'm going to go techie, we're going to containerize it. Basically, what we're saying is let's take a fourth copy, but let's get it where no one can touch it. You'll hear things like air gap. Somebody's absolutely going to have to, outside of your backup environment, outside of your main environment, get there some other way. So we remove it away, we put it in a vault, and that's what brings the protection. So your replication, very quick, very up. If you're having power issues, no big deal. It's easy to access. If you're in a deeper threat state, you need those other ones to protect your business. That's why we rack and stack them. They work so well together.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love it. Um, you have to set the requirements before you determine what you're going to do. And that kind of leads us into the next topic of conversation is, RPO and RTO. RPO and RTO are two terminologies, two acronyms used in the backup and disaster recovery space. And just to what Josh and Tom mentioned earlier, it's important that we understand what these are and define these so that we can pick backup copy, backup replication, or what the combination of both will look like. And it's all based on those requirements. So RPO is the recovery point objective. RTO is the recovery time objective. So Josh, can you kind of break down for us just each one of those, just for vocabulary, because as soon as leadership, starts hearing these techie terms or these acronyms and stuff, all of a sudden it's like, phew, we shut down, right? So can you,
Yeah, of course.
in some layman's terms, explain why these two things are important to any leadership team to understand?
Yep, of course, because it all involves your business. So your RPO, your recovery point objective, is essentially the freshness of your data. It's, how frequently you are taking those backups, and it measures the amount of data that will need to be the amount of data that you lose that would need to be re-entered or recreated after an outage. So your recovery point as a business is how long can you be, between backups in case of a total disaster? How much data can you, I guess, lose and have to, re-enter without it being business crippling, if that makes sense. Your RTO, your time, it's the amount of time your business can tolerate. If you're a high volume business, your recovery time may be just, a 4 hour time window. We can't go a full day without having our business operate. We can't go a full week without our business operating, and I think what's really important as a business is you want to make sure that you define your disasters. I think that's what's going to be key to discovering, what your RPO and your RTO is. And, just going through an exercise with your IT provider can help you kind of get there. It's, you sit down with your IT staff and you talk it out. You say, how far back can we go without, it totally crippling our business, and, how much downtime can we have, before we have to be back online and, going through transactions or handling our day-to-day business. So, real simple layman's terms, but again, I think the biggest first part is, defining what those disasters are for your company and taking time with your IT staff to kind of talk about, what it would look like from a disaster recovery standpoint.
Yeah, for sure. I think your IT provider, or if your IT provider doesn't do this, finding another IT provider or consultant to just sit down with you and put on a board. These are all of our key critical applications. We've got emails, we've got phones, we've got file systems, we've got our ERP, we've got all these different systems that we have data, and some are more important than others. I don't think they're going to be upset that we're or get jealous that the email system is more important than the ERP, but you have to define what systems are the most important and how long you can live without them and how much data in those you can lose before it's business prohibitive. And once you kind of identify those and determine their priority, it takes us into the next phase, which is coming up with a plan. You have to have something documented. So Tom, on your side, having an organization that understands their recovery point objective and the recovery time objective, what does that mean when putting together a plan?
Well, you guys are hitting the nail on the head. We say, what do we need to do to keep our business up? And from an executive standpoint, we hear, well, I need that ERP system. I need that website. I need that accounting system. It's a very vague way to paint a picture. You've got to engage your IT team so that the executive staff is saying, this is my business continuity. These things must happen in these time frames. You need the priority because, listen, you can't just say, I need everything all the time. The gap between the first system and the last system, we can shrink that down pretty easily if we know where to go, but still it goes from system 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the executive staff have to make that decision of what comes up first. But behind the scenes, it's so easy to say, I need that website to work. The IT staff needs to know these 4 or 5 critical systems make this one website. So that's where it's critical. Executive staff, IT staff, you need to pivot your thinking to say it's a system up. It's not a server up. Server up was 5 years ago. Just get my server up. Now it's okay. I want my website is the key deliverable. IT needs to know it's an hour. It's 4 hours. Okay. Under the hood, executive staff doesn't care, but the IT team does. Okay, these 4 systems are going to come up in this sequential order. So you move to app delivery. Like, app is the cool word now. What is your app? How will you deliver it? So that's the partnership between a strong IT provider and the executive staff. It's that conversation, because in the end, executive does care what comes up. You just don't care how we cook up that magical sauce. So it's conversation, it's planning, it's deliverables, and coming together.
Absolutely. And I think the team together has to really, in layman's terms, express what these systems mean and talk in terms of operations. So instead of saying, hey, we need our ERP up in 4 hours, we have to be receiving orders from our customers within 4 hours, because it means we have a loss on productivity or we have staff that's waiting. If we're not getting our billing out, it goes into a following week, and our receivables aren't coming in, and it's setting us back on cash flow. You have to have the conversation on, if our emails are down and we can't communicate, what does that mean from a business standpoint? Communicate that to the IT team, and they have to put the pieces, like Tom, you said, the servers in place that make that up and bring that back. The age old triangle of a product, quality, time, and cost always comes into play in these things. Tom, you just kind of reminded me of that every executive can say we need everything up right now. And what we have to understand is there's a time element, there's a cost element, and there's a quality element. Yeah, we can get all your systems back online now, but that's going to suffer on the time side, or it's going to suffer on the cost side. There's going to be greater costs with that. We can say, listen, we want the low cost solution. Just know that there's going to be more time, a bigger gap between the disaster and when you get back online. So you have to have a very real conversation about this. Set the requirements before you even start talking about costs, before you start talking about the systems and providers you need.
No, you're exactly right. And I always take it to be like the insurance salesman conversation. And I hate this. This is why you need insurance. And you're going, I don't need that insurance. And then the sales guy goes, here's your worst example ever. And everything goes. And you're just like, oh my gosh. And that's kind of like their pivot. What I like to tell the executive staff is imagine we walked into your server room, and we just said, I'm shutting that one thing off. What does that feel like? And then you're right, Eric, it's the cost factor. Does a billing system really affect? That's a great example because on some companies, it is the lifeblood. Other companies, they say, you know what? No, 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 no. It's important we bill people, but it's more important that we track billable. So let's make sure we're tracking our billable so we can continue to increase revenue. And okay, it's not great, but you know what? In 4 hours after that point, we can start sending out those invoices. So you have to know your business, and IT doesn't always know that. So you're right with the marching orders. We have to have that to deliver. And I don't think any DR person ever sits back and cackles and says, how can we slow this down for you all? We want it all up immediately. We want to be out of it. We're sweating as much as you are. But that's the whole thing. It's that communication. And I think you hit the nail on the head right there. That triangle, it's crucial.
Yeah. I laugh because I had two of our most important customers in the conversation about return to operations and recovery point objective and recovery time objective. And, I said to one, what happens if your systems are completely unavailable to you in your facility? One customer, let's say there's a fire. One of our customers said, listen, we're hit $10,000 a day with fines. It's important, right? We're doing some really important stuff. This other one, who's actually larger and we thought would be, even more pressed, was like, we roast marshmallows on the fire. Like, I'm calling the attorney. There's nothing we can do. Our product is gone. There's no reason to have a computer system. So if you don't ask those questions, you never really get to the real answer. So yeah, so let's kind of, we talked about a couple of things here. We talked about the 3-2-1 methodology, which is a standard. I mean, that's like the minimum. And then Tom, you mentioned global data vault, saying, hey, get that extra one in there, get that off to the side. That's a very important thing to talk about, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes here. But we talked about the difference between backup, copy, and replication, recovery point objective and recovery time objective, and setting those requirements up before you put your plan in place. We've heard over the past 5 to 10 years, more in the past 5 to 10 years, about going to the cloud, and the cloud can protect you, and you'll always be available if you're in the cloud. And it's this messaging that's been just driven home at the leadership level that the cloud is the ultimate savior for everything. One of the biggest cloud providers out there is Microsoft 365, and we are a Microsoft reseller. We love the tool. We use the tool in every way that we can. We're using it right now to create this webinar. What is Microsoft's promise? Josh, I'll ask you.
Yeah.
What is their promise when it comes to protecting your data? What does that mean to them? What does your data mean to Microsoft? Besides an opportunity for analyzing and selling.
Right. I mean,
say that for
beyond that, Microsoft obviously offers a lot of great services for the cloud. Like you mentioned, Teams, Outlook, the Office 365 suite in its entirety. But unfortunately, backing up that data is not one of those things. You still, own all of your data that is a part of the 365 suite. So, even though you're using Microsoft's platform, it's still your data, and you have an obligation to protect it if you feel that your business, needs to have retention for the files that you are, utilizing in Office 365, including email. So, that may be something where you're going through your recovery and disaster plan and you say, hey, we need these emails as well. What kind of services can you offer that helps protect our email? Office has retention policy, but retention, isn't backup. So utilizing a service like, for us and some of our customers, we utilize Veeam for Microsoft Office 365, and that helps to prevent those, disastrous situations where you have users who, may accidentally delete a bunch of emails that were super important that you just, can't recover through, Office 365's means. You have that backup copy to help, protect you. So, again, it is still your data. It is still your company's obligation to back that up should you, need to. But again, that's kind of comes all back to what we've been saying. Have a plan, sit down and talk about what systems you can and cannot go without. Office 365 is one of those systems that you have to keep in mind as well. And, it's up to you and your business to decide if you need to have that information backed up.
Absolutely. And one of the challenges we see a lot with a lot of our customers is that, we have hybrid situations where you have servers in the cloud, you've got PCs in the office, you've got remote workers. It's getting extremely complicated. And it's getting to a point now where even IT people are struggling with syncing Active Directory in the cloud and all these different ways you can create these environments. So what I think leadership is kind of confused on is, well, is this stuff really at risk? I mean, if I put this in the cloud, isn't that just protected? I mean, they can't get to it, right? Because it's not in our office. And Tom, I'll look at you because you're very, very heavy into the protection against ransomware and other threats. I mean, once you get your 365 information or your information to 365 or G Suite of apps, is it really off limits now to threats, or is it still a risk?
Well, and that's the whole thing. It's always a risk. The whole reason that we're living in a malware world, it's not because somebody wanted to write this cool program that just locked your data. They want to get paid. So the evolution of backups were they didn't exist and malware came around and somebody said, we're going to encrypt your data. Well, guess what? Now we want to get paid. And we're like, oh man, how can we prevent this? Let's start backing up. So now backups came around and we were like, wow, this is great. Well, suddenly people weren't getting paid. So being the entrepreneurs they were, what did they do? They said, well, let's go ahead and attack those backups. And so, here comes the Pac-Man of the world and it eats the backup and encrypts and they go, now we get paid. So we go, oh, let's go to the cloud. Let's go to the cloud. And so the cloud really became two things. Your availability. I use Microsoft Office 365 all the time. Like, I love it. Gone are the days of, is my email up or down? Like, whoo, it just works. Reddit would joke and say it's Office 364 because guess what? Every now and then it blips, right? So backups are important. Your backup is important in that instance from the standpoint of imagine facing some deadline and you needed some piece of information and email wasn't there. Something happened. It would be nice to have some independent way to recover back that email, that magic Tumblr piece. Your backup on a high level is going to bring that to you on Office 365. Okay, 365 is having its off day. They didn't plan on February 29th, right? Leap year or something. And you need this piece of email. We can recover that back. The other thing I like to look from an executive team is think about the time before Office 365. We had on-prem, email servers, and everybody's like, man, all we do is fix our email. And then we started seeing hosting services and Global Data Vault at various times used different hosts. I felt like it was a hostage situation as an executive. How do I use this one product and all my data was there? And it was really easy to put my data there and it was really hard to get my data back. Now, I can't imagine a time that Office 365 doesn't exist, but let's pretend new version of something somewhere comes out. I mean, that's what technology is. By having my own backups, I own my data. I have my data. I don't have to retrieve my data. So if I need a pivot as an executive, I'm already there. It really helps me keep my vendor neutrality in place. I can review it and make a good decision. And malware, right? If something does ripple through that environment, I have that copy set aside. Because remember, they want to get paid. So Eric, we've talked before in our private meetings of, how susceptible is Office 365? Do we see this on the threat matrix? The answer is yes and no. And I get that's a cop-out. Yes, because someone wants to get paid. So if they're doing it, they haven't, had a lot of press behind it. But if we don't see it, They're working on it. They're coming for you. We have to be one step ahead. So it is crucial that you have those backups. It really, really is.
Absolutely.
Sure.
The order of operations usually is there's a threat or there's a vulnerability that's made public in some way. It's been exploited by some sort of attack, and then we patch it. Or, you know, the data gets encrypted. Now we start using backups, like you said, and now they're like, oh, hey, we're going to go after the backups now because people are backing stuff up. So you have to continuously be addressing these things yearly to identify any sort of risk, any sort of gaps. Has anything changed? Talking to your IT provider, your cloud solutions provider, is there a new threat? Making sure that they're constantly improving or shifting the way in which they do business to adapt to these new up and coming threats. It's a never set it and forget it mentality. That's for sure.
No, not at all.
And so getting kind of into the backup piece, Tom, you mentioned that hey, they're attacking these backups. So how does an organization, obviously we partner with Global Data Vault for our cloud service offerings. How does a company like Global Data Vault protect backups against ransomware? How does that, to a leader, someone who's in the finance department or someone who's director of sales or something like that, they don't really understand how everything all comes together. How do you protect against a ransomware attack with your backup solution?
Well, what we had to do was go and think first, and we had to say, what is everybody doing, right? Because we're basically saying these ransomware attacks, they're businesses. Are they going after Fortune 100s because they're getting a big payday, or are they going off of lots of mid-size and going, it's a volume game? And we found it's a volume game. Like, you are susceptible. You think you're not on the map, you are. So we said, could we really be a responsible company and sell a product that handled your backups with Veeams, came to my cloud, but then in your worst moment say, oh yeah, by the way, Pac-Man came about, he ate your local, he went ahead and he got up into the cloud. So we said, we've got to be better than that. So that extra -1, that 321 you talked about, and I snuck that -1, we really had to say, we need to write a product that says, I'm going to protect you more. So what we said was, let's gap it. Let's move it outside of the vulnerability matrix. So a lot of those attacks that we see, they come into the environment and they search and they snoop. Part of doing a backup from the customer side up to the cloud, there has to be some sort of management by the software. So the customer side, usually the brain. Well, that brain can tell the cloud, delete. Scary as it is, it has to be able to do that for retentions and different functions and just read and write. I mean, it's like saving something to your desktop. You can write it, you can delete it. You have to have those proper things in place. So Global Data Vault said, we need to kind of make a read-only copy that nobody can get to. So we like the word container. So what we did is we said, okay, Veeam is our engine, it does our transports, it does our backups, but now it's at Global Data Vault. Well, we need to do two things. We need to get another copy. Well, in our case, we said 5 copies because 5 is better than 1. 3 is better than 1. All right, 5 is better. And now every executive who's listening to us just went, wow, thanks, Tom. I'm so glad that you could take 5 copies. Could you charge me for that? Because I really want to spend that money. I'm being facetious, right? They're just like, come on. How many copies do I need? So we had to say it had to be cost effective. So we wrote proprietary software, we call it enhanced data protection, that is able to containerize 5 copies of this data, and we're able to only use 20% more storage, which, okay, you don't care about the storage, but in essence, you're buying cloud space. If I said for 20% more, guess what? It's all going to be wrapped in there. You're getting a little bit excited, but you're like, what is 20%? Well, Global Data Vault said, we don't think we can pass that cost on to our customer. That's not fair. Is it really a valid product? So now it's an integrity thing with Global Data Vault. So now you have 321-1, but that 1 expands to 5, and it's already there. It's included there because we know we have to have integrity to bring people back. That's how important it is to us.
Great. So that copy, everything kind of happens the same way. You have your nightly backups or your semi-daily backups and your hourly replications and whatever's going on. And then on top of that, you pull something off to the side, you put it somewhere where nobody can get to it. And just in case the attackers attack the backup and they just start ripping off data.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head.
Awesome. That's huge.
For sure.
So often we say the term disaster, and everybody kind of responds differently. Tom, like you said about the insurance thing, this thing could happen, and everybody's always talking about what if. An organization that is small has the same amount of risk as an organization that is large. The things that happen out there to kind of find you don't care if you're a government agency. They don't care if you're a small mom and pop shop. They don't care if you're a restaurant. They don't care if you're in manufacturing. They're finding you. They don't know that information until they're actually in. An example of this is we got brought into a situation as a third party back in, I think it was 2005, 2006, where a customer of ours out in the middle of nowhere, 6 people, I think they even still had like a DSL line. But somehow someone got into their infrastructure, and the owner says to me, he goes, why would anyone want to attack us? And to your point, Tom, earlier, number one, there's an opportunity for money, but number two, it doesn't, that's what these attackers do. They get in there for whatever reason. Does it matter what the reason is? They did it. There's either data available, they're just trying to check something out that they're doing to see if it works. They may want some street cred, whatever the case, they're in. And now today, with the liability and all the regulations of the government and state levels, you have to protect that information. So from a ransomware standpoint, from a software standpoint, backups, they help, replication helps. Josh, what about organizations that rely heavily on their hardware warranties? I mean, is that something that they should feel all warm and fuzzy about, knowing that they have a 4-hour mission critical warranty?
You shouldn't rely just on your hardware warranty. Let's put it that way.
Now you're joking. You're laughing. Why is that?
Well, here's the thing. Let's say you have a situation where your building, unfortunately catches fire. I'm going real extreme. We're talking disasters. That's a pretty big disaster, right? So you have a server that catches fire, and you're like, oh, well, that's okay. I have a 4-hour mission critical warranty through my hardware provider, whether it's, Dell, HP, whoever it is that's providing your server. They're not going to show up with a brand new server in 4 hours, put it down and say, I'm hitting the power button. You guys are good to go. Have fun working again. It doesn't work like that. Not only that, it takes time to rebuild, a server from scratch and get it back to the way you were operating your day-to-day business. And that's why it's so important to have one of those pieces, one of those copies of your data stored off-site. So in case if there is an actual, disaster involving your physical hardware, you have the ability to, get back to it. You shouldn't rely on your 4-hour mission critical, warranty through your hardware provider as a factor in your recovery time objective. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, water main breaks, things overheating, melting. I mean, this stuff does happen.
Happens, yeah.
You got to think about that stuff and what it would mean to your organization. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So now, Tom, we obviously have just a couple examples of bad things that have happened. You being in the availability business, I'm sure have seen some things happen in your day. Do you have an example of a company that had a good plan and executed that plan in it doesn't have to be a dire time, but just a real challenging time?
I can think of two, and really, it's what's a good plan, right? So I'll share two with you. One is an absolute disaster. It was in the Midwest, in a tornado alley, if you will. And one day we got a picture in an email, and they said, "How quickly could you get us back up?" And in that picture was their backup server dangling by a network cable and there were no walls around. I mean, it looked like something out of a war-torn movie. And it was just like, well, I guess we're not coming up on the customer site. So we rolled over. It went so effectively. The hardest, biggest hurdle we had was changing people's work habits, if you will. You used to access it this way. Hey, we're in this situation. And so they just had to come in a different way. They knew how to do it. Why? Because they tested. And I'm sure we're going to talk about that a little bit later. So that was a good plan in a bad situation. But here's one that I really like a little bit better. One of the companies that we worked with gave us a phone call and they said, yeah, we have an issue. And we're like, oh my gosh, what is it? And they said, well, nothing's down. And we said, well, how do you have an issue that nothing is down? They said, well, we just acquired this new company and they put water pipes running throughout the drop ceiling in their server room. This company was diligent enough to look up underneath and go, look, there's water lines up there. And they said, well, this kind of spoke to management to say, we better have a plan for things we didn't even know were going to happen. It's not just malware. It's not a tornado. It's things you couldn't imagine. What a bad one, I'll give you one funny one. Someone went to go ahead and clean the floors in an office building one time, plugged into an outlet. That outlet was connected to the power grid of all the servers because on the back side of that wall was a nice little electrical receptacle. Someone just popped it on through years ago, and some poor person went there and started using that floor sweeper, and it was a new floor sweeper. Voltage draw, you can imagine somebody shouldn't have, but how would you know that? So those are kind of my stories. It's anything can happen, but imagine that server dangling. Like that's my absolute favorite story. And we got through it. It was awesome.
Absolutely. And we don't sit around the water cooler as computer nerds and make fun of people in tough situations. So we want to make sure that your data is there because I mean it can be crippling. It can be absolutely crippling. But that story about the server hanging by a network cord, that's outstanding. It's good network cord, good ends to that. I'll tell you.
And if I may, real quick, it's going back to that story with having the server, dangling. Think about how much easier it's going to be for your company to just, quickly change the habits of your work culture. So, they may not be accessing the server the same way, but they can still access the server. The change in the habits in your organization, just pointing to a different server in case of a disaster, is going to vastly outweigh having your employees re-enter hours and maybe even days and weeks worth of data. So, it's real easy to point someone over at something else. It's very difficult to have someone, recreate their work over the last week. So it's always, better to have a change in, a momentary shift in work culture and how you connect versus, again, recreating all of that work over a long period of time.
Could you recreate the work? I mean, that's the real question is, was it a week? Was it 6 months?
Yeah.
So yeah, we're clicking a little bit differently and we test through that. We're getting to that later, but you're right. It's just so it's that insurance thing again, right? Beforehand, you're like, man, I don't want to click it that way. In the middle of it, you're like, thank God, this is the best thing ever. It's that mental space we're in. And we definitely, Eric, you're right. We never sit around and we're just like, man, ha ha ha, look at that company. I think we like to celebrate the win, at least at Global Data Vault. When we get through it, we kind of love to have that after party, as we call it, where we all sit around and go, we did it. Nobody knew we did it. We didn't get credit for doing it because it worked so well. All right, everybody, let's eat our favorite cheesecake and celebrate together. So absolutely.
Yeah, there's something magical when a plan and a strategy gets executed in the most dire situations and you come out on top. It's definitely a great feeling. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm a leader in an organization. What does that mean to me? What do we do next? And the first thing I'm going to say is, I'm a leader in our organization. It is my responsibility to ask questions and understand how we are protected. I don't expect all of you to think to yourself, I have to go get educated in the ways of, computer nerds and geeks out there and start, going through computers for dummies and stuff. You don't need to ask technical questions. What you do need to ask is our information backed up? And if someone says yes, you don't stop there. you dig deeper and you ask the questions that are most important to your organization. If the person on the other end doesn't understand why they're being questioned, it's your responsibility to ask those and understand. So, okay, so if it's backed up, so if I lose data tomorrow, when's that going to be back? What's the probability of something happen? Ask business questions. What about our email? If someone deletes all their email, how long do we have it for? Ask very, very simple but direct and concise questions. That way you can't get the generic response. Oh yeah, you're protected. No, you're good. Yeah, we'll have, yeah, you'll be up. Ask follow-ups. When? What will we lose? What are the ramifications? Who do we call? Get the detail of that and start putting together a plan. Josh, on your side, I know our customers come to us all the time with, well, how can I test this easily? What are some of the things that anyone in an organization can do to kind of test out their backup?
Sure. Let's just go real simple. Something for, that anyone in an organization can do. Create a file, create a Word document that, you just have as like a test Word document, drop it in your file share for your server, give it a day or so, delete it, and then, reach out to your provider and say, hey, can you recover this file? I think I lost it. If they're able to get it in a timely fashion, that's a great test to make sure that everything's going. If you're having the wheel spinning going on, they can't recover it, then you may need to take a step back, look at your actual plan, and see what you had documented. Like, what are my recovery objectives? And if they're unable to just grab a file from a simple test that you performed, you may need to rethink your plan. Because if you're doing something very simple and they're not able to get that, you're going to have even bigger problems when something more than a Word file that you had just with the words test written on it gets deleted. So, being involved and performing those tests yourself, even if they're simple, it's going to help, validate that plan that you created to make sure that your business is being protected in case of a loss.
Yeah, and then this isn't a trust or a micromanagement situation. This is a risk aversion situation. It's your responsibility as a leader in an organization to ensure that the company operates. So it's my responsibility to make sure that 15, 16 people have jobs, they have paychecks. I'm not going to risk that because somebody's vague and says, hey, yeah, the backups are working. Okay, you got to follow up. You got to keep on that.
Yeah.
Thomas, on your side, that was an easy test. I guess how do we test, take a step back. Every night, every hour, whatever it is, our backups are running, our replications are running. We're getting results that are coming back saying, hey, it passed, it's successful. Can we just bank on that and feel comfortable knowing that the backups were successful and we don't have to do anything else?
No, you can't, because we're using the latest and greatest AI to be able to say, is it good? Is it recoverable? Does it meet every benchmark you could imagine? But, I go back to my early days of computing, and we used to always say, you're only as good as your last backup, but more importantly, your last restore. So you need to have some way to test it. So you're right. Testing for a file, that's an easy win. But on your worst day, are you recovering a file? Probably not. So you need some way to effectively test your environment. And it is a double-edged sword. Many times in the backup technology world, we say in order to test you, we have to shut off your protection. Can you imagine that? Imagine being, and we were there, 10 years ago or however many years ago, where you would test a customer and then all of a sudden you'd get a phone call from somebody else in the org going, no, we need whatever, right? And you'd be like, no, I'm in the middle of a test. We're totally doing this. And they're like, no, we're having a real failure. This is a bad day. So in your testing, you need to make sure, can we test? First, yes. You need to do a real test of what does the simulated event look like. We need to not put our business at stake. So the first thing is finding the technology that will allow you to test. Of course we can. Can we do it without affecting current runs? Yes. Now we absolutely need to put our hands at that keyboard, and we need to feel, what does that new work habit look like? When I go into billing, can I run a simulated bill? Can I go ahead and run a website? Whatever you need to do every day, can you do? So I always joke and say, well, there's 2 ways to test this that's effective. Number one, you should be able to do it from your existing desk chair. Cool. But sometimes your desk chair is not there. Go to Starbucks. Pay your people to go sit at Starbucks for 4 hours. Space out a little bit, wear your mask, whatever you do. I don't know what we do anymore. But you go somewhere else and you work. And that is really important. And see, what does it work and look like if I take my laptop, my tablet, and I go to Starbucks? Can I still do my job from somewhere else to somewhere else? That's an effective test. You have to know those things. It's crucial. You have to do it. And you have to do it regularly too, right? If I did it one time after I wrote that check, what good is it in a year or 2 years or 5 years? It's a regular schedule. That's part of that plan that you talked about earlier. As an executive team, you need to regularly test it as you go.
Everyone went through fire drills.
Go ahead, Josh.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just going to say, everyone went through fire drills, growing up, going to school, right? That's simulating a disaster. And you had those frequently. A fire drill wasn't just a one-time thing while you were in high school. You had, constant drills to remind you, of what a disaster looks like. And it's important to your business to make sure that you're testing that, as frequently as you can, to make sure that, your business can run in case of a disaster. It's like Tom said, it's simulated, but you want to make sure that you're not just doing it once every 5 years, because what happens, year 3 when you have that disaster and you didn't go through, the test that, the tests and the applications that you want to make sure are working, they're not working anymore because you didn't have those frequent tests. So, yeah.
It's amazing the commitment to testing, how resistant many are to doing tests, but then the first people in line when the systems are down asking for their information to be available. And it's a mentality at the leadership level. It's a mentality that needs to be driven down into your organization that these systems are critical, which is this kind of all comes full circle back to the building those requirements with your team. Have your management team part of this so they understand why they need to do testing when we do the testing. They know that if we go down and we invoke DR plan ABC, that their orders are going to be online in 5 hours, invoicing is going out the door in 8 hours, and then within 24 hours, operations is getting new orders and everything is in progress. That way they know they better be testing this, because if it doesn't happen, what's the point of being in business if it's not going to continue? So great information. This all really ties together, but it needs to be owned by somebody, and it's got to be the executive team. The executive team has to make sure every year they're talking and asking questions. Your IT providers should be managing this, but not all IT providers are on the strategy side, and most are just on the execution side. So it's important that these questions come up.
For sure.
I kind of want to wrap up here. I know there's a lot of information that we've talked about today.
For sure.
I want to make sure everybody understands that's listening to this or seeing this, watching this, that we are always available for questions. You don't need to feel that you have to have a contract with us. You can always reach out, and we will help you and lead you in the right direction. Because the less instances we have, the better off we all are. Insurance rates go down. It affects our communities when there's outages. We just had a situation with a school. Now we've got kids that are home for 2 days, and now those parents have to stay home, and all those businesses, it just filters out and spreads out into the community. And you need to be up and operational to support the companies that rely on you. So it's your job. So anytime you can reach out to us if you need more information, we are available. I want to thank Tom May from Global Data Vault. I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule. I know things are always interesting in the availability game. Your insights and your understanding are valuable to us, and that's why we utilize Global Data Vault.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate the knowledge.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, it was great. I love these discussions. Just preparing people for the worst. It kind of helps us breathe a little easier, I think.
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, absolutely. And what we're trying to do at Copeland is kind of bridge the gap between the tech people and the business minded people, the management, the leadership, the directors, because for so long there's this feeling that there's a disconnect and you can't talk to the IT team because they talk too nerdy, but then the IT team doesn't know business. It's time to get the IT team at the table. I have a funny podcast or a video out there that, when is the IT person going to leave the kiddie table? They're that 14-year-old, cousin that is still watching all the other ones at the kiddie table. They need to be at the big boy table. They need to be at the grown-up table. And those conversations need to happen, and it's the responsibility of leadership to facilitate that. If you want some information, you can reach out to us at all times, solutions with an S at copelandts.com. We'll reach out to you. We'll see if we can help you in any way. Also, you can follow Josh Grabowski and myself on LinkedIn for more insights. We're trying to invest heavily on sharing information and pumping some how-tos out there and things at the strategic level. Hopefully that content reaches you and you find that useful. Besides that,
Absolutely.
do you guys have anything else to add? Don't get into the any sort of football rivalries or anything like that. We don't want to start going down there.
No. Yeah, no, I just, again, I just want to, if anything else you take from this session, it's, sit down and, get a plan and get it documented. I think overall that is, one of the most important first steps you can take is, take that step back, get something down on paper, and then act on it. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
All right, great, everybody. Thanks for your time today.